Well, I'm sure a lot of people shouldn't really be surprised that what a lot of us pretty much figured out was going to happen has occurred. Chaos Control 14 is among those that got his issue today. And I don't think it should come any bit of a surprise to the summary that he gave us. It shouldn't come as much of a surprise to the pictures that people have posted of what exactly has happened to Tails, Amy, Shadow, and Knuckles. It shouldn't really come as much of a surprise. Now, I know a lot of people, I know there's going to be a lot of fans that will be asking why. Well, quite simply, whether you want to admit it or not, what has happened to those characters in this crossover at the start of it is basically balancing out in some kind of strange way what's happened with Sally. Now, let me explain. Let me explain why the robotization in a strange way balances out what she has become. Because I tried to say this before. But the reason it balances it out in such a strange way is due to the fact that when you take the crossover instead of spanning it over the summer over 3 different comic books, here's what you get instead. You get a year's worth of a crossover equal to 1 comic. Am I not right? Now you might say to yourself, not say to yourself, but now you might agree with that. You might agree that, okay, if it was 1 individual comic, it would span a year. And I want you to think about this. We are getting a year's worth of a crossover within the span of just a few months. Well, just within the span of this summer, of this late spring, of the spring and summer season. We're getting this crossover. Now you might say to yourself, now you might still ask, well, how does this equal out to what's happened with Sally? Well, it's quite simple. It's quite simple when you think about it. It's very, very quite simple. Like when you look at when Sally got roboticized, it's been over a year since her robotization. And technically, in a sense, it's been over a year since she was modified. Well, been a year since she was, a little over a year since she was modified. But the point I'm trying to make is, when you take a look at this crossover, and you, instead of spanning it over 3 issues within the summertime, within the spring and summertime, and instead have it individually, month by month, individually released, month by month, within 1 comic, you kind of say to yourself, wow, that is just as long as Sally being roboticized. I mean, true, a lot of the characters will pretty much be restored by 250, if at most. We don't know how it's going to happen. We don't know if the effects are temporary or permanent. We don't know. Well, we know it's not permanent, I should say, but we don't know if it's temporary. We don't know how temporary it's going to be and how the effects are going to be reversed. All we know, apparently, from what we hear, is they're nothing more than part of an experiment. But again, the point is, when you individually read this crossover, and you have it, when you individually look at this crossover from a 1 comic book standpoint, you kind of get the idea why I said in a strange sort of way, and some agree and some don't, that it does balance out for what's happened to Sally. And again, some of you will agree and some of you won't. But if you look at it, like I say, from a 1 issue standpoint, from a 1 comic book standpoint, it does kind of balance it out, if you will. Because you're technically taking a lot of issues. I mean, in 3 months, of course, the character is going to be restored. There's no doubt about it. Sounds like to me. But you're basically taking each and every character, roboticizing them, if you will, and thus, if you will, spanning it for about a year. So, again, I know I'm sounding like I'm repeating myself here, folks, but it does balance out in a strange sort of way when you individually look at it from a one comic book standpoint. But now another question. Another question that will arise is, what will the aftermaths be? What will be the aftermath when this whole crossover and everything is done, and we head into a new arc or whatever Ian's got planned? What will be the after effects? What will be the aftermath? I know I talked about this before, but now that it's been about a year or so since I've talked about it, I'm willing to talk about it again, because the more I look at this, and when you add in the crossover, you say to yourself, you kind of have to ask yourself and say to yourself, man, I wonder what's going to happen story-wise. Now, we all pretty much know that several of the established characters are going to get redesigned. We pretty much know that. But the thing is, how will it come to be? One of the hints that we got is a modified Krazud plant or vine being sort of an antidote. And secondly, how the character is going to react. I mean, I'm sure we're going to probably have a moment, whether people like it or not, where Amy probably has to talk with Sally and say, hey, I know how you feel. I too was roboticized. I became a roboticized master, and I know what it's, like to be manipulated and used. I'm sure we're going to have that. But the more I look at this, the more I'm starting to think that this is all leading to something big as we get to the next anniversary issue after 250. 275 or 300, something big is going to go down should the comic last that much longer. Because a lot of fans are pretty much not very optimistic with what's going on behind the scenes. But anyway, let's say it heads in that direction. And it should, because there haven't been any news items or anything saying otherwise. But let's take a look at the possibilities, if you will. Had to drink some Dr. Pepper there. Let's look at the possibility. We know that Ian's probably, and I'm just, my opinion here, is probably going to write something to where Sally, Sonic, Amy, Tails, Bunny, and all of them are going to want payback big time on Eggman for what he's put them through. So I'm pretty sure it's going to lead to some kind of final confrontation with Eggman again, but this time to the point where he's, not only beaten so bad and devastated so badly, but to the point to where he's going to be probably gone for maybe 10, maybe a year, and we'll have somebody new come in and be inserted, but we don't know who. We don't know who that would be. But I feel a huge confrontation, a huge final confrontation again is what we're leading towards after this crossover and after Sally's restored and the redesigns and everything take place. Because again, you got to think about it. All of them, in a way, are going to want payback. And they're going to want payback in the biggest of ways. But then again, you got to ask, okay, if that happens, who's going to step in as the next villain? Well, there's a certain white echidna that's up for grabs, or up for that position. And there might be a certain possessed skunk, if they'll still be able to use him, that's up for that position as well. Well, the wizard inside him, that is. Or maybe even a new entity. You know, a lot of people want to see Nega in there. Whether some will agree with that or not. Some would even like to see Black Doom. I mean, man, think about that. You get Black Doom added into the scenario. So many possibilities. But again, I feel that the character is going to want major payback for what Eggman's done. I really do. Another thing I see happening, and I've mentioned this before, but I see the characters like Sally still being herself. She'll still be herself no matter what you say. But I see her basically saying, yeah, we're going to still plan. We're still going to plan and go on missions. But I see her, along with the other characters, embracing a bit of Sonic's attitude. Being like, okay, here's the plan, here's the mission. And then, like, no matter what's thrown at them or anything, they'll kind of have the attitude like Sonic does and goes like, is that the best you can do? I thought we'd get better. Because you got to think about this from a character standpoint. The reason, character-wise, Eggman always gets frustrated as to why he can't beat Sonic is because Sonic just shrugs it off like it's nothing. It's like, you know, no matter what hits him, it's like, hey, no big deal. What is that the best you got? And I got a feeling, in a sense, the characters are still going to be themselves, but they're going to adapt that attitude when they go on missions and stuff like that when it's all said and done. I know that sounds kind of crazy. I know that sounds kind of stupid in the eyes of some, but you know what? Can you think of anything better? You probably can, but it's just my opinion on what I feel is a possibility. Another possibility, you know, so again, it's just my opinion. And, you know, again, you know, I definitely see something with the redesigns. You know, I see the redesigns as sort of being like a temporary deal, as some people have looked at. I see them being temporary, but I also see them sort of in the near future being sort of a back and forth deal. I'm not lying. I see it sort of like a back and forth deal with the characters. And what I see is them being in those outfits on and off. I really do. I know some of you may not agree with that, but I do. And as far as, like, say, the facial redesigns and all that, I see some of that as being temporary too. I see that being temporary because I pretty much figure, in my personal opinion, it's all going to be an after effect of what's happening currently with this new Genesis wave that's led into the crossover. So, to me, honestly, I think these redesigns are facially and all that, physically, if you will, are just temporary. And that the clothes, in other words, but the clothes, let's say I think they're going to be kind of back and forth. I really do. I mean, again, I really do feel that way. Now, however, I know some people listening to this will disagree. And again, and now I apologize if this is in two parts. But I know some people will disagree with that. And that's fine. That's your opinion. But I just feel that's what we're leading towards. I mean, you got to think about it this way. Character-wise, put yourself in Sally's shoes. Put yourself in Amy's shoes and Knuckles and Shadows and Tails. Put yourself in those shoes. You've just been roboticized against your will. And you're being forced to do what your enemy is asking you to do. And not just that, you take a character like, say, Amy Rose. I mean, her roboticization, if you will, combined whatever Robot Master program Wily uses, has her hands replaced by pico hammers. Go figure.